Well, yeah, okay. I think this is up and running. Yeah. Hello everybody. This is Ninja LU, and today, well, suffice it to say, we're back to the more podcasty style. Except, arguably, in this particular instance, it's not even very. Okay, come on, do this. Yeah, that's better. Except in this instance, it's not. No, I don't want to. I want to accept shoot. Except, yeah, in this instance, I'm not even going to be particularly podcasty. Well, yeah, it's... I don't know what this is. Don't ask me what this video is meant to be. So it's always a good start. I have some rough sense of the ideas I want to talk about on this, but have not yet put them all into any coherent form. So yeah. Okay. Something I'm going to begin with. This is a misconception that there are so many places to begin. Okay, yeah, I'm going to begin not actually with LU, but I'm going to begin with physics, and I'm going to begin with, or not just physics, but academic life in general, and I'm going to begin with a misconception. And this is a misconception that I had throughout, like, many years of education, and it's a misconception that I am concerned and scared that I still have. So, what am I talking about? Actually, you know what? No, I've got a good idea for this. I'm going to be in a loop. Or I don't want to be doing something where I have to think about it a lot. So you know what? Let's go for a really good high score on survival. Let's pick up some stuff. I don't really have any good items for survival. Who cares? Okay. Realistically, it's probably just a good idea for me to just make this the size of my entire screen. One thing that's actually worth noting, I guess, if I probably won't do it on this character, just going to be a lot of time and effort, but a good idea for characters at least. So, many of you will notice that when I run around, yes, I'm now talking about LU, yes, this is what happens in all of my videos. Yes, I am already off topic. But anyway, yeah, you may notice that when I'm running around and fighting, I quite often do rather a lot of this. Swapping between various things, just so that I can get particular combinations of items up, so I can have cooldowns up at the right time, stuff like that. I might say swap back to this to repower up that, and yeah, there we are. What this basically means is that I need to have all of my good weapons and items in a somewhat like collected area. What I would suggest for anyone starting out on a new character, setting up stuff like that, is to put them all... It'll obviously be a little bit difficult because you won't have all this inventory space to begin with, but I'd suggest putting them somewhere like here. I'd suggest not placing them at the top, because what that means is that you can then, if they're somewhat more central, currently I can only have this area up whilst I have my items up, whereas say if my inventory the inventory I used was like this square here, I could go down. If there were consumables here, I could pick those up. I could scroll up. If there are consumables here, I could pick those up, while still having this section available to swap items to and from. So, just thoughts. Anyway, I think I'm just going to see how I go. I'm just going to hop in. Standard loop. It's probably going to be Batlord Helm for speed, Hood of Quakes for regen, and I will use Dock in a Box armor brush, etc. to regen health on the fly. Probably won't bother with Anvil of Armor because that's a bad idea. And then I can get started. Okay, so yeah, that'll be probably what I want to start with. Yeah, no, let's get this up first. Anyway, alright, so getting into this. I also probably will break my discussion up as I go and as I fight, because that just ends up happening. But anyway, let's go. So, what is this big misconception that I've had my entire academic life? Not that's been hugely well. It's been hugely long as a percentage of my life because it's been my life. Like pretty much everything thus far I have done has been since a pretty young age centered around academia and being interested in that. So yeah, what's this huge misconception I've been making? The misconception I have had is that at different levels of education, things change. Now, I don't know how true this is in general. This is a misconception, but this is something I personally found to be... Yeah, okay, I don't think I'm going to play hugely well during this, but well, it won't hurt too much. Yeah, I don't know how true this is for other people. This may be purely down to kind of my strengths and weaknesses as to why I found this to be the case. But anyway, the misconception is basically that at some point the fact that at some I do not perform particularly well in exams. I would say that I am a pretty good physicist. Like I've done that wasn't very good. I've done rather a lot of good physics, done interesting physics. I started doing my own research long before I think anyone. Yeah, very bad. Long before I think there's kind of any expectation for someone to. I've been doing stuff like that for quite a while. And so I would like to think that I'm relatively good at this sort of thing. At this physics thing. But the issue is that for years, it was kind of the case that none of that mattered. It didn't matter at A-level, it didn't matter at GCSE. For those who don't know, those are just exams in England, or like about 5 years, which are teaching you skills which culminate in exams. It didn't matter how good I was at research, it didn't matter how many interesting, potentially even novel ideas I'd had. All that mattered was how well I performed in an exam. It wasn't really a thing at primary school, it definitely became a thing going to secondary school. There were definitely some good things, so I guess a point I was kind of going to make is that the misconception is believing things will change, but I mean, it would be disingenuous of me to say that I didn't think anything changed between primary school and secondary school, or that nothing I cared about changed for the better between those two, because things definitely did. At secondary school, I found a genuinely incredible group of friends. By the end of secondary school, we made up about the friendship group made up about a third of the year, and it was largely founded on us just being the nerdy ones, which was brilliant for me because at primary school I did not have a great time throughout parts of it because I was always the nerdy one and got picked on by other people for being that. At secondary school I was like, no, I'm gonna lean into embrace this, and I happened to be in a place where lots of other people like that. And so yeah, things definitely did change between the two. But I'd say right from the beginning of secondary school, I was suddenly confronted by exams as a concept, and they like as something that determines how good I am at something. That had never really been the case up until that point, and I personally did not exactly thrive under this. I would have a tendency, and still do in exams, and this is largely because I've let's be clear, this is not because this I'm not complaining that I in some way can't do exams. No, I'm lazy is more or less the short thing, or I'm lazy at a subset of things in my life. One of those things is I have never put in the time and effort to get good at exams. I'm well aware from lots of people in my life that this is a thing you can do. It is a skill you can learn. I've always been too lazy to do so. I've never put in the time. I've put in time and effort for lots of stuff for physics. I have never put in the time and effort to get good at taking exams, which, had I done so, I might not have gotten into what I would argue is probably quite a vicious cycle of, I'm not good at exams, therefore I'll look for something else for validation, and therefore, well, I'll never look to improve at exams. But I don't think this is just exams. I think this is kind of a more general point, which is about what motivates you, and about whether or not the system you're in lines up with what motivates you. What you're is what you're expected to do something that you fundamentally want to do. And I think it's always been the case, at every point in education, I've always been like, oh yes, this is the point where it's going to line up better. It's going into GCSEs, it was like, yes, finally, I'm gonna get to drop some of the subjects I didn't like, so now, everything's going to line up better with these subjects that I really do like. I'm gonna get to spend more time doing physics, and the physics is going to be harder, and because physics is harder, maybe now this will be the time that I'm really going to stand out with that. And no, sure, my teachers were like, yeah, he's a good physicist, but when it came down to it, what I tended to be judged by, or at least to the world and the wider world in general, was always exam results. But I was met with the promise that no, don't worry, because at A level, suddenly the questions, they're a lot less, learn the mark scheme, learn exam technique, learn to do exactly what people expect of you, or learn to predict exactly what someone's going to expect. It was going to become less of the pleasing this higher authority, more of just show them what you know. This really excited me. It's brilliant. This is going to be the time where finally I get to. It becomes just a case of, okay, show someone you know a lot of physics, that you understand it well, that you're in some sense competent. I was like, yeah, I feel reasonably confident I can do this. I think I am quite a good physicist. So yeah, I think I should be good. I think I'll quite enjoy this. And then A-level happens, and it's again not the case. It's still very much a question of living up to someone else's standards. It's still which I guess that on its own sounds like, well, yeah, of course we are as individuals judged by society. Exams exist because we have value, to assess our value to society, etc. Or any comparison that anyone else is going to be making you will be by their standards. No one's going to be really interested in my standards. They're all going to be using their own standards, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess it comes back to how well standards align. Or how well standards, interests, motivations, why I'm doing what I'm doing, how much of that is because this is what I want to be doing, and how much of that is because this is what I need to do because it's what I've been set. And the point was that, don't worry, at university, right, at university this is all going to change. Because at university, suddenly the problems get much more difficult. They're kind of, exams are focused differently. You'll have lecturers who will be really excited to see someone interested in their field of research and will be really interested to help out, etc. And okay, this kind of sounds now like I'm having a rag on our lecturers. No, we've got some great lecturers. But the point is, at the end of the day, the academic side of university is assessed by exams. And I can't get around that. That's just the truth of the matter. Yes, the exams are definitely, from my perspective, I would say better. As in, they're better for me. They test. They are still time pressured, which has always been the thing I've had a lot of difficulty with. But they've fitted far more with what I'm good at, which tends to be delving into a problem, like long problems rather than lots of short recall. And yeah, I'd say the reason why I like to think I'm relatively good at physics is because I've got a fair amount of experience with like just delving into a problem for like weeks or months on end and like trying to come up with a solution, trying to work that kind of thing out without anyone to guide me. Like when I say I'm good at physics, I guess that's the definition I'm using. That's my standard, but it's not everyone's standard. An alternatively equally good definition that still doesn't rely on exams would be to say, okay, how efficient are you at physics? I'm not necessarily the most efficient person. Like, I'm pretty good when I'm left to my own devices, but conversely, I think there's a real risk that if I do go into research, if and when I go into research, that I actually, depending on how the research group is structured, I might not particularly like being told exactly what area to look into. This happened over the summer with one of my projects, the research project I was doing this summer. Fortunately, my supervisor was amazing and like really built in that level of freedom into the course, and I guess there's an aspect of like I have the option to really look for a supervisor who will give me this freedom that I'm kind of interested in. And like that's something I can do with a PhD or the like. Sorry, I'm now losing my train of thought. But that's not necessarily going to be true with all supervisors. There are definitely like, if I were working with another supervisor, well, I may well have a tendency to not trust them that a particular area is a dead end. And I'll still want to look into it myself, want to convince myself of it, and I will waste time retreading other people's going down other people's footsteps for that reason. That's not a good thing. That's not me being good at physics. It happens to not be rather logically, it's not the definition I subscribe to as for what it means to be good at physics, because if I did subscribe to that definition, I probably wouldn't be very motivated to do physics, because suddenly I would be not as good at it, and it's harder to be motivated for something you're not as good at. So what this brings me down to is this fallacy that I think I've had at quite a lot of points in my life, which is that, hey, at this next step on the road, I've combined route and road, en route to academia, in this next step, you know, academia is what I want to do, and at this next step, this will finally be that step, right? This will finally be the time where, you know, suddenly the interests of those around me match up with my own. and suddenly like this is going to be the time where I find it really easy to motivate myself to do physics, because, you know, I'm getting like credit for stuff I'm good at, and I'm getting feedback, or like people's standards align with mine, so the credit I get will be for stuff I feel I deserve, and the feedback I get will be improving me by my own standards, not by someone else's. So I will become a better physicist, but not by someone else's standards, but by my own, and I logically would find that more rewarding. This whole thing, I guess, is about standards matching up, and I guess this is my real personal quandary. Is I'm currently considering, I'm on the fence as to whether or not I want to do a 4th year of university, or whether I want to try and go straight for a PhD. Lots of people think, like, in the UK, are kind of under the impression that this isn't a thing. It is. Yeah, I do know multiple people, including actually one of my tutors, to whom I spoke about this, who have just gone straight from a master's to straight from a bachelor's to a PhD. Like that is doable, and so I'm currently debating whether or not I want to do it. There are lots of issues with it. I'm not saying it's an obvious thing to do, or it's what everyone should do, because there are tons of issues with it, and that's why I'm still grappling with it myself. For me, the pros are, well, it means I don't have to do another year of being assessed by exams, basically. The cons are, well, places aren't just going to believe, oh yeah, this guy says he's good at physics, he's probably quite good at physics. Like, that's not going to be sufficient. People want you to have qualifications so that they know you're relatively good at the subject. If I don't have an extra year's worth of qualifications, and I'm competing with people who do, that's going to be significantly harder. I'm going to be far more likely to be limited in the areas or in the research groups where I can get any placements. And so, whilst yeah, it's possible, I would be losing options there. I'd be cutting off various options if I were to go that route. And so I guess the next... Oh, I just realised I'm doing survival, so this is going to look awful in Streamlabs. Because it's got that weird, every time the health flashes up, it flashes up across the whole screen thing. Or not health, every time score does. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, my question really is, because I've now got to start thinking about masters and PhDs, and like potentially could even have to write a project proposal in the next couple of months, like if I wanted to do a self-proposed PhD, which I think would be a really nice option. Yeah, I'm left in a bit of a difficult position, because every single like stage of my education, what's been getting me through is the fact that the next stage will be different. The next stage will finally be the one where, like, what I want to achieve, I think that's possibly the best way of phrasing it, where what I want to achieve matches with what achievements are expected of me. What I want to achieve is being a good physicist. By my definition, that doesn't always match up with the good physicists by other people's definitions, and I'm not saying their definitions are wrong, I'm just obviously interested in maximising, or doing what I feel will maximise my self-worth. And the operative word there being self. And, well, okay, there's a huge argument that, well, you shouldn't be setting your self-worth by something like physics necessarily. Like, do you really want your self-worth to be set by a job? And like, okay, that's not good. But regardless, I do want to be a good physicist by my standards. And so my concern is that every level in physics so far has been solely dictated by... the dictates have been those which don't really match up with my own aims. And not just dictates, but the advice. I typically get advice on how to do better in exams. Because, like, whilst I feel I'm a relatively good physicist for my age, by my definition, in the grand scheme of things, no, I've been god-awful. For my age, I'm alright, and I've probably got more experience than quite a few people who've come through the school system, because the school system, you've kind of got to sacrifice stuff in the school system in order to do the stuff I decide to do, and I think most people are honestly probably less lazy, more motivated, whatever, than me, and so would probably have done what was asked of them there, rather than trying to seek... rather than having, not just trying to seek, but rather than having to redefine what it means for them to be good, just so that they aren't terrible. But yeah, so I feel I keep rephrasing that. Hopefully you get what I mean. But yeah, so what this comes down to for me is, do I actually... What are my thoughts on a PhD? Is this going to be another case of I convince myself this time it's going to be different, when in reality, it isn't. It's exactly the same as every other time I've thought that in the past. This is the concern. And I don't know. What I feel like, honestly, just making this video kind of helped, because I realised, actually, I guess a large part is determined by whoever I'm working with. If their values well align with mine, then yeah, I probably am going to enjoy this, enjoy it far more. I guess it's really on me to not just not go for the most prestigious place. Or I mean, this is a recommendation you get from lots and lots and lots of people when it comes to, well, most things in life. Don't just go for the thing that is objectively the best. Go for the thing that's the best for you. Or when I say objectively the best, I mean collectively regarded as being the best. The best universities, or the highest ranked universities, may not be the best universities for everyone. I personally am uncertain as to how good, as to whether or not, I mean, obviously I've only been to one university, but I do wonder if, or I only started at one anyway, but I do wonder if there were other universities out there that I may, in which I may have felt their interests better aligned with mine. I was always, I guess to some extent, what got me going to university I ended up going to was because that was a way of showing I was good at physics. If I could get into this university, on top of everything else, this place I believed was going to quite neatly help me with what I wanted to be good at for physics, match my definition of physics in terms of how I would be assessed, rewarded, etc., whatever. Oh, that's bad. Let's get moving. I'm also slowly going down in imagination, which isn't great. This should put me back up by a little bit. Yeah, so I guess it's a case of really being careful. Look for, when I'm applying to jobs, apply to them not just on the basis of their kind of global prestige, but on the basis of, how well. It's the age-old thing about interviewing for various things. interviews are a two-way street. And I think I've heard loads of people say that, but I was kind of like, ah, yes, they're a two-way street. I should ask some questions. But realistically, when I go into the room, I've probably already made up my mind on what I want to do. No, I think that's where I'm going completely wrong. I think I need to... I'm actually now thinking of one part of my course where I had to have to select a supervisor, and I'm realising I'm probably falling into the same mistake there as well. I'm selecting a supervisor. The issue is I don't actually know the supervisor well enough to know whether I am or not, which is, I guess, a case of more research needed on my part. Let's also heal up. But yeah, so that is my primary question for myself at the moment. And I guess I've kind of answered it by doing this, which is just... I've screwed up at every step in my physics career so far, I would argue. So I've got to be really careful because, like, this university was not a terrible decision. Lots of things don't quite match up with what I intended and or expected, but as it happens, that's actually the case for, I think, most of us here. Like, I don't think... I think a lot of people went to this particular university and was just like, oh yes, this is a relatively well-ranked university, therefore it's good, and it's like, no. And so I think for a lot of people, there are lots of people here in the same boat as me, which is kind of really good. And on top of that, like, I don't know, I genuinely, I feel lots of things don't make this university brilliant. Like, I would argue it has a far better reputation for teaching than it actually lives up to. On the other hand, I just received an email. On the other hand, what it does do really well is it brings a lot of people who are actually motivated by quite similar things to me, and so whilst the system as a whole might not be motivated by it, because I wasn't the only person who kind of fell into this trap, it's actually been a brilliant place. So I'm not dissing the university experience or the experience I've gotten from this when I make comments on it. But yeah, so my real question, well, I guess is, I've got a kind of open question for you guys. I can't really think off the top of my head. I should also really check that I am actually recording the gameplay footage. This is going to be a little bit difficult to do. Okay, I am. Good. Yeah, I should really... dang it. Lost train of thought when checking that I was recording gameplay, not my screen in general. Also, I'm fairly certain that's the Red Blocks music it plays when you use the disco ball, which I like. Kind of like there's only one bit of music in LU, only one bit of pop music anyway. I think it's the same anyway, it might not be. But yeah, so my question for everyone is, my interests in science are typically centered around spending quite a while looking into in depth, learning about, basically working in particular areas in a lot of depth, spending a lot of time working on problems, but with the freedom to move about to some extent where I choose. And I guess this is... I like saying this, obviously... Well, it may or may not suggest a PhD, depending on what you know, think of the PhD system, who you know that's been through it, because experiences vary, and I think that widely is dependent on supervisors. But asking the question, say I don't want to, say I feel that the PhD isn't the best choice, I wonder where else could I go to do physics? Is the only option a PhD? Is the only option writing papers? And I know for a fact that this isn't the case. So some of my friends are tutored, well, yeah, okay, I'm just going to go with that, by a guy who basically, he's to my knowledge at least, I haven't actually read anything he's published, but he is, to my knowledge, a professional researcher. He certainly offers research projects to students and the like, and that's how my friends know him. Tutor was a bit of an odd choice of term. But the interesting thing from my point of view is the fact that he is not employed by the university, or at least certainly the research he does, I'm fairly certain it's not directly employed by the university. There may be some relationship there, I don't know what it is. I haven't gone through his bank statements. But my point is he doesn't actually, like, he does research which isn't kind of done by / for the university. Obviously it's theoretical, because it's a lot harder to do research off your own back if you actually have to obtain funding for it. But the point is, yeah, more or less, that he manages to do research completely kind of under his own steam, under his own volition. He makes enough money through teaching that he's able to do this. Speaking of which, I'm not actually certain how anyone could actually make that much money through teaching. Teaching isn't exactly the most well-paid of professions, despite how taxing it is. So, okay. Don't know the answer to that one. But, yeah, so I know there are ways of doing that, and education with research on the side does spring to mind for me. It, like, definitely is something I find interesting and enjoyable. One thing I really, really get a lot of satisfaction out of is teaching people physics. So maybe there's an option, but I'm interested in other people's opinions on, or ideas, just thoughts on where a place is that you can largely set your own direction as to what questions you want to look into, or what aspects of a particular field that you've chosen you get to look into. And yeah, where the aim is in depth. Like, where the aim is just, I guess, the same as it is quite often in research. But I guess even that isn't actually great. Like, there are definitely things wrong with physics research, or specifically with, even if I take it in its most abstracted sense and imagine the, like, maybe for me best possible like supervising in workplace, well, there are still other issues from my perspective. Some of them small, some of them large. Like, the scientific community is a large and incredibly archaic and slow-moving body. It does lots of things quite strangely, and whilst I'm no expert in those at the moment, I suspect that would grow. Other issues, sorry, also with the previous thing, as well as it kind of still being, okay, doing physics research, and arguably it's the case that your supervisor is just yourself, and it's still like you've got a supervisor for a particular project. Or PI, whatever, yeah, you're still your own PI. Or not, you're still your own PI, but you are effectively your own PI. So for those who don't know, PI is not private investigator in this context, it is a principal investigator, which is the person at the head of a lab or group. Well, this is bad. There's stun locked at the moment, fortunately. And I mucked that up. And then I still ran back the same place and got me killed last time. Nice. Until I'm good at this. But yeah. So, things I have considered are educational videos, because genuinely educational video, so like doing educational videos on the main, maybe even like documenting research progress. I guess at that stage it comes up to being effectively equivalent to vlogging. But yeah, physics-based videos, because there is a market for that, but conversely, I don't think I'm good enough. Like, teaching someone in person, that's relatively easy. Producing a video which has broad range appeal, which does a topic you know well enough to make a video about it, which you find interesting, and doing that well, such that it's understandable by a broad audience, that's incredibly difficult. And like, I have the utmost respect for people like 3 Blue 1 Brown, etc., who can manage to do this even somewhat consistently as a day job. Like, that genuinely astounds me that anyone is as good at it as some of the science-based YouTube channels out there. And I realistically don't think I could ever even really hope to achieve that. So, yeah, I don't know. But I'm just interested in hearing ideas, thoughts, places people have gone into, things they would recommend, things they wouldn't, because this is an open question for me. But yeah, and then there's the one other thing which I guess I can relate via YouTube, and well, largely via this channel as well, which is me being uncertain how long I'm going to actively do this for. Because realistically, and by this specifically I mean the main Ninja LU channel, but probably this one as well, because let's face it, this was set up as Ninja Vlog, as being me doing whatever and talking about whatever, but there is genuinely, whether I like it or not, there is some sense of I do get feedback, whether I choose, like, whether I actively try and listen to it or not, I do get feedback on what people are interested in or not, and I'm well aware that people who are here mostly know me from the LU community, mostly know me from stuff like this, and so even if I am talking about whatever I like in these videos, people still expect videos to be mainly LU content. And again, I shouldn't look at this, but I do, and I will notice that like people aren't anywhere near as interested in videos I produce that aren't LU, and that makes it harder to motivate me to get doing that. So when I say this, it's largely thinking of the Ninja LU channel, but I'm not planning on, at the moment at any rate, with how things stand, I'm not planning on producing videos indefinitely. Like, the Ninja LU channel at the moment, there's one place really I could see it going, which is once the LU releases, and once, like, if a community is able, well, okay, there already will be a community, but if a large and active enough community forms that we get people modding in new worlds, etc., sending mods back and forth, that we get really, really cool content being produced by the community, then one thing which was suggested to me, and which I think would be really interesting to do, would be showcase that. And it'll be a really good use of the platform that I've made, and that kind of fits into what the Ninja LU channel was originally meant to be. So that's something I could possibly do. But I no longer have as much time to spend working on these videos, and one other thing I've started recently is really trying to prioritize. Oh yeah, basically over the summer I worked out basically some stuff about myself, and mostly it was how I automatically and instinctively deal with stress, and the fact that I don't deal with it in the healthiest of ways necessarily. And instinct almost tends to be to when I'm stressed about something or whatever, to go into a mode where I'm either working or I'm relaxing. And one thing I noticed when I started doing that, which I think I've talked about previously on here, is that my relaxation mode was... I didn't have any freedom with it. My relaxation mode was, you must be doing something that will help you recover energy, or whatever. And I was unclear about exactly how that was defined. Like, the most obvious thing was like, yes, I should be spending my time sleeping, but if I'm not tired, what do I do? Well, I probably YouTube. I want to watch YouTube videos, something like that. I'll waste time, I'll procrastinate. That's not hugely satisfying, though, and ends with me in a loop of, I guess, effectively just staying up later and later, hoping that maybe the next thing I do will eke a bit more satisfaction from my day, and I'll be able to be like, yes, now I can go to bed. Like, feel like it's been a good day, finished off stuff. And it's like, realistically, that wasn't happening, and largely the reason it wasn't happening is because when I get into that mode, one of the things I instantly rule out as a form of relaxation is social time, because social time does take energy. And the point I guess I was missing out was the difference between kind of physical and mental/emotional energy, i.e. Physically having enough energy to work versus feeling fulfilled, satisfied, excited, ready to work. Anything you care to, any set of adjectives you care to use to describe that. And so this led to, for instance, those series of videos I did doing random, stupid LWO.xml based challenges. And over the summer, basically, I had talked with some people, with some, like, really incredibly helpful people, which kind of made me realise, oh wait, I am, like, these are incredibly minor stresses, and, like, I'm at the moment in a place of pretty good mental health, but let's take this as an opportunity to actually plan for that inevitable point in the future when I'm not, because one thing that's a genuinely terrifying statistic for someone who is currently still planning on going in for a PhD is the fact that 50% of PhD students, it's argued possibly more, will experience depression or depression-like symptoms over the course of their PhD, which is really terrifying when that's your end goal. PhD, not depression, let's clarify. Although it seems the odds are 50%, so those two are not entirely orthogonal. I'm looking this up. Let's be a little bit more careful. There we are. we're going around this way. Had more momentum than I anticipated. But yeah, and effectively what I realised is that I really, this year, need to make a conscious effort to not do what I normally do when stressed, which is spend time at home on my computer, or to spend my spare time at home on my computer. The issue, of course, is that was when most of my videos, etc., got made. Okay, probably, yeah, okay, arguments as to how much or how many, but it was certainly an environment that led to me making these, and the issue is, I've been trying really hard to kind of change. Well, yeah, okay, God, there's a lot that go into this, but effectively I'm spending a lot more time and effort trying to get to know all the random people around me. Get to know a lot more people, and really actually ensure that I am in a position where at any point in time, if I at all points in time where I am ensuring that I get enough emotional rest. Like the idea, I guess, being to, whilst I'm in this position of good mental health, set myself up for times when I might not be, and try and avoid those rather than just trying to deal with them when they happen. There's an interesting analogy about UK healthcare versus healthcare in certain other European countries, and the fact that ours can quite often be seen as backwards because it largely focuses on solving problems rather than preventing them. And effectively, what this made me realise is I should spend time and conscious effort ensuring that I am going down the preventative route with mental health, etc. And that involves the really, really arduous task of, having like better and more friends. It's really a tough life, a tough goal. Yeah, there could definitely be worse things to do for health. But yeah, the issue is that will necessitate probably spending less time on the LU community and stuff like that, because, well, realistically, I'm going to have a lot less time because I didn't spend a lot of time socializing before, and, like, at university at any rate, I spent very little time, like, actively socializing. And doing that will take up time, and hence will take time away from LU community stuff, and unfortunately, for my sake, the LU community stuff would have to be the stuff that would get dropped. That is not to say as well, that's not to say that the LU community is, like, bad for my mental health in some sense. That's not really the point I'm trying to get across. It's just that, well, it's a lot harder to get to know people, make friends, well, online just to begin with, but on top of that, especially when you're sitting behind what is effectively a mask, which, like, people have very specific expectations of, and which, like, is not the entirety of my character. Like, I find it interesting that, yeah, Ninja of LU as a username / account / person that exists in the online space is obviously the way I behave and act under this persona is similar and related to me in day-to-day life. It is also markedly different. Like, I do not behave in the same way. There are things I am concerned about doing online, which I would not be personally, like, normally or whatever. I don't know. Like, for instance, child friendliness would be an obvious example. That I'm obviously far more concerned about that as a guy who most of whose audience come from a child's game. Like, there are quite obvious reasons I'm more concerned about child friendliness here than I am in real life. So yeah, I'm not. I do want to keep doing this stuff, but I want to be careful that I don't prioritize this over university effectively, because I bear in mind it's not just this that I've been prioritizing over that's been coming before socializing. It's also just largely been work, and a lot of this came from a discussion I had with a really good friend about the fact that actually we are in our 3rd year of university, and we have spent, like, our priority this whole time has just been studying. There hasn't, like, the priority has been, yes, be best student possible. It's, well, I guess, again, this comes down to a question of aims, goals, targets, whatever. Like, the target from the university is get as good a grade as you possibly can. And it could not care less. Oh shoot, I actually need to be a little bit careful how I play this. It could not care less about a lot of the other stuff I'm talking about. And yeah, effectively we realised that we've both been definitely putting studying and being the best academic student we could possibly be over being the happiest, most satisfied, whatever you want to go, person we could be. Like, no, this is not really a great position to be in. Let's change that. And so realistically, I do not think I will. This isn't like I'm saying, oh, I'm going away from this channel, etc. But it is, yeah, I will be less active. It's not a complete coincidence that me discussing this also coincided with the whole DLU thing. Like, that also got me to evaluate how much time I'm spending in the community, how much time I'm spending on this. It's not in the case of, no MMO, therefore leaving community because Ger angry. It's just a case of, I don't know, it made me consider that everything I had taken as an assumption about the community, or that nothing I had taken as an assumption about the community could be guaranteed, because of course this is just an online community. and it's an online community, not even centered around our own IP. Like, the odds of something changing in an unusual, unpredictable way are pretty high. And I shouldn't regard this with as much permanence as I do. Again, not saying anything's going to happen to the community, but I shouldn't assume that the community and the way in which I interact with it is fixed permanently, because that would be very, very strange. Why would I assume that? I don't know, but it seems I kind of have been. And yeah, that being said, it's not like I dislike the community in any way, or like LU as a game. Like, I really, really, really enjoy challenging myself in LU. It's really, really good fun. I mean, yeah, the physics part of me really enjoys it. It's working out strategies, etc., where none were intended, or working out optimizations when none were intended, which, depending on your philosophy/religion, could arguably be the definition of physics. Like, yeah, just trying to work out things that I don't think the developers intended, or just stuff that no one else has noticed even. It doesn't even have to be a question of intention or otherwise. Just the challenge of hunting for something, which I guess, again, is the same thing that I really do enjoy. In physics, it does give me a sense of satisfaction. The only other thing is that well, a couple of things. I do need to make money, enough to live on at any rate, and and it is also more satisfying to do something where I can potentially see my work benefiting society, which, well, there's less of that as I run around in circles in the Vanguard of Survival. There's also another part of, like, largely with the Ninja of LU channel, as of DLU releasing, it will have fulfilled its purpose. Like, I set that channel up with a very definite purpose. It's been feeling, with projects getting closer and closer to releasing, as though that purpose may come to an end. I think when DLU does, it probably, at least how I envisaged it originally, yeah, there's the original purpose, there's no real need for. Could I change direction slightly onto a more showcasey kind of thing? Or even, like, showcasey, like, expert perspective on, like, certain LU things, because, like, there are definitely certain things which, at least at the moment, I mean, that could well change, but there are definitely things at the moment that I would say I know more about than probably anyone else. When it comes to LU. And so, like, yeah, I don't know. I feel an expert, in inverted commas, eye on, like, in a property showcase could be really good. It could be quite an interesting perspective to have, whatever. Or, like, not even like world property showcases, but just, like, cool stuff people have done. That could be speedrunning strategies, for all I care. And in fact, I'm gonna say a bit of a shout out at the moment to a user called Ellis, who recently joined the speedrunning community at about the same time as I actually stopped being the guy technically running it. I mean, it was never meant to be me technically running it anyway, but as I step back from any sort of responsibility whatsoever, this user joined and did the best research we've yet had onto what I like to call one of the best optical illusions in LU, which is what I'm trying to demonstrate at the moment, which is look how fast I'm going. I'm running in a I'm running by pressing simultaneously W and D, which means I run in a diagonal line. Now, there's a thing in lots of old games where... Let's just get my life back up. Yeah, there's quite a common theme in old games where running in a diagonal line actually makes you faster, and that's because quite often the games simply just add a velocity when you're moving right and add velocity adds velocity when sideways when you're pressing D, and adds a velocity forwards when you're pressing W. So those two literally just combine. And so you can move about 40% faster when you're pressing both. That's just Pythagoras. Okay, it depends on the game, because quite a lot of games will also make you move sideways a little bit more slowly to incentivize you looking forwards whilst you run. And I've personally seen this effect and been like, oh yes, this seems like I'm moving faster when I press both at once. And I did some tests. They suggested that you didn't go any faster, but this user Ellis was also interested in looking into this, which was brilliant. And they did, yeah, I think the best research done to date on this, like actually setting up an auto hotkey script and timing things. And the reason why you feel like you're moving faster is also quite an interesting one, because it's basically, this does look faster than this, but it isn't. Arguably it might be slightly slower. My results suggest it would be slightly slower, but I'm more inclined to trust Ellis's, given they were done with a hotkey script, so probably more consistent. And yeah, the reason why this happens is effectively it's the same reason that things appear to move, that you appear or feel like you're running faster when you're using when you're playing on a Quake Pro setting in games where you've got a very, very, very high field of view. And the reason for that is because, well, the larger your field of view, the more stuff has to fit on the screen, which means the more stuff has to move about on the screen. Or like, yeah, the larger distances covered in a small space on your screen, which means when you move, because the distances covered are the same, but you're kind of packing them more in there, and there are also some effects to do with things on the side, and like what you're focusing on, but effectively it is typically more distance is being covered as you move on the screen if you kind of average across the screen or average across the area the player's focusing on. And therefore you feel like you're moving faster on Quake Pro settings even if you're not. And a similar, very, very similar effect holds for when you're going sideways, because their stuff is the same reason you look like you're going faster. The things seem to really rush by at incredible rates if you just look out of your car window, whereas you're out of your car side window. Whereas when you're looking at the road ahead, it doesn't seem like the car, things are moving about as fast as the trees rush past you when you look to the side. Despite the fact that actually oncoming vehicles are probably going about twice the speed of the trees, more or less, on average. So, yeah, it's a similar thing. But yeah, so that's the kind of thing I'd be quite interested in doing, in having a channel on. Like, it's actually analysing interesting videos put out by the community on LU stuff, because I think that's really interesting, that's really cool. So that's the one thing I can really see myself doing in the future. And of course, I will still play this, but honestly, making videos that are just, well, at this stage, what's the point? Like, the reason I released Ninja Warlog videos of me playing the game was simply because, well, I spent quite a lot of time playing this game, and I couldn't put it all on Ninja LU, so I was like, well, might as well find a place to put it. because like lots of people want to see LU gameplay, and with DLU being closed, there's nowhere else they can really get it. With DLU opening by the end of the year, like that's definitely not going to be the case. So, okay, I was kind of got greedy. Let's recover from that. Also, let's just be clear, I think I've used like 3 or 4 armor heals during the course of this. That's over an hour. And that's over an hour of, let's face it, not actually particularly great gameplay. On top of that, there are actually times... Oh, this could be where I die. No, that's helpfully kicked me away. Got me to safety. There are also times, like I notice occasionally, where it seems like I've smashed most of the enemies. Or at least most of the enemies are stun-locked by my... by the Jester Cap. Well, I probably could regen some health or armor with another item. I could probably do that safely. Let's on cooldown. This coming off cooldown. I feel like I kind of did this the other day as a proof of concept that, hey, you can do quite well on this, and like I think I can do this more or less indefinitely. I would have to mess up quite badly, I think, to be smashed here. One way I could mess up is by going far enough over where I just went to aggro everything. That way could end badly. Because I do still need to dodge every single enemy, and the more enemies I have firing at me, the more likely one is going to be in my way. Especially given that my strategy involves having, at all times, an item that is effectively stun-locking enemies, meaning that it is quite likely that I'll be in a position where an enemy has been stunned and I just run into them, and it's realistically me running into them which will cause the problems. Or slow me down. Also projectiles, even a lot of the ones that look like they hit me don't, they will slow me down. Which can be enough for something else to catch up with me and then smash me. So I've got to be a bit careful of that. But yeah, and I guess that's also a piece of advice I'd give to everyone else as well. It's, yeah, take care to surround yourself, especially in work, with people. Like, I think it's really easy to not do this, and God, it also sounds like I'm suggesting getting yourself into a bubble of people who just agree with you, which is a little bit concerning. Like, you don't really want to do that, but there's also some extent to which... Okay, no, I think this is the division. Ensure that the people whose decisions can and will... Like, okay, yeah, it's a case of... Ensure you have everyone's opinions, but ensure that you're careful with whose you take on. With whose you automatically listen to. So a big thing for me is, which kind of came from primary school, was being very, very clear that I'm not going to let anyone determine, anyone but myself determine who I am, what I want to be, and the like. I don't want to feel like I am doing something solely because it's socially, like going to a party. I feel I can have value whether or not I go to parties. go to many parties, and for ages, like, I shouldn't need to be seeking out kind of the social affirmation of, say, going to parties, being cool by going to parties or whatever. I shouldn't have to, that shouldn't be something I need to seek out to feel like I have self-worth. I should be very careful to ensure that's not the case, and I guess what kind of... And my issue with that was that I ended up taking it too far, and ended up more or less getting in the perspective of, yeah, anything which is, like, kind of people do it just because everyone else does it, like, that has, like, it almost was part of my identity that, you know, I don't go to parties, I don't do stuff like that, because that's stuff that other people do just because that's the social norm, and I'm not going to let myself be determined by that. Which kind of was missing the point, like, that was what that became in my head, which kind of completely missed the point of where I say, no, actually, the reason I was saying that I didn't want to be affected by that as social norm, I didn't want that to become, like, for that to be a thing that changed who I was, but conversely, I'd argue it did change who I was, but the fact that I then defined it as a rule that I wouldn't do that. It was more it should originally be more the case that I wasn't going to do it just because other people told me to, but I then actually ruled out the option of doing it because I thought I might enjoy it for quite a while, and that was something I only realised recently. So I guess, yeah, my point with all of this is... And yeah, so it wasn't like I didn't change, I kind of thought that, you know, oh, I am peak human, you actually can't get any better than me. But I would, and like, it was a case of, yeah, taking on people's opinions, but not changing myself unless I personally decided that I wanted to take those opinions on board. There are very few people in my life whose opinions I will take on board unconditionally. Most people I will consider... It tends to be a case of I will consider their point of view... Oh, shoot, this could be where it ends. Oh, no, it isn't. Most of the time it's a case of, yeah, I'll consider your point, and if your point makes me a bad person in terms that I would define as being a bad person, then I will do something about it. If your point is that I'm a bad person, say I'm morally inferior because I don't go to parties, well, then I'm not going to really care about that opinion, if I'm honest. I will listen to it, I will consider it, but like, my worldview does not have me being bad for not going to parties. So if most people say that, then I will... Then, yeah, I will consider it, but it won't change. It won't change who I am. There are a couple of people, I'd say, who I do trust enough that their opinions probably would less conditionally change who I am. But conversely, I know they wouldn't tell me to just go to... that I was a bad person if I didn't go to parties, or if they did, I know they'd have like an incredibly good reason for it or whatever. But also, I really, really doubt they would. However, I know they would call me out if I were being an idiot. But anyway, yeah, I kind of got off on a tangent there, from what I was talking about, which was, yeah, ensuring that decisions about, like, what workplace you go into are made for the right reasons. You don't want to be... Like, the analogy to the way I handle personal change is you don't want to be unaware of everyone else's opinions, but you don't want the opinions that directly. You want to be careful that that you only let people directly affect you who you trust, or you only let ideals directly affect you when you do trust them. Be open to change, but don't necessarily put yourself in a position where you don't trust the aims or whatever of those around you, or you don't think they're correct, because obviously it's not a great thing to do. And had someone told this to me when applying to university, I would not have listened. I would still have done exactly what I'm doing now, and I would still be here making this video, having only just realised that kind of thing. It's incredibly hypocritical of me to even give this advice, because I wouldn't have listened to it. But I'm hoping some people do, and I'm hoping I do, because I think that I'm still in a position of doing things because they are the obvious, correct, generally viewed best thing to do. And it's worth being careful that you don't put yourself in the position where someone else is defining that for you, or at least if you are, because realistically we won't all be self-employed, but where whoever is employing you at least lines up well with what you personally do believe. I don't know. You get the idea of what I'm saying. Well, I hope you do. If not, I am happy to expound. But I think most likely you got it within the first 10 minutes, and I've just been rambling for the rest of the time. But hey, that's basically a summary of most of my videos. Yeah, okay, that was just a proof of concept, which is that there are times in this loop when you would have the opportunity to do something like putting down an anvil. Putting down an anvil probably wouldn't be the best example, because well, I don't know actually. The times are kind of quite far and few between. Ooh, not good. Let's get this up rather quickly. Let's go better. Yeah, and I guess kind of also in the vein, this is now just me talking on less important stuff, something less prepared to discuss, but well, yeah, I'm better preparing to discuss all of that in fairness anyway, but okay, I'm just getting a bit in front of me, should be a little bit careful. Yeah, one other thing which I have been thinking about a lot more recently, which I find really interesting, is as part of my course this year, we had one option which was effectively a course on how to teach physics, which I jokingly found incredibly ironic that that the department, which currently has been doing a rather debatable job of teaching us physics, was going to teach us what the gold standard was. But then I began to realise that actually, wait a second, I don't think any of our lecturers are necessarily bad teachers. I think it's more the system they're placed in that makes them bad teachers. So maybe they are the best people to be. But then I kind of continued thinking about it, and realised that, more importantly than any of that, this physics education course was in the context of going into schools and helping teach there. And it made me think of something which I'd argue is interesting, concerning, telling, which is that I do not believe schools represent the gold standard of education, or I do not believe that any large-scale teaching establishment represents the gold standard of education at the moment. Or at the very least, maybe not the gold standard of education, but the gold standard of explaining topics, because those two are very different things. And let's be clear, I am not insulting teachers. This is actually largely taken from a large thing which kind of great thing this is my mom, who's a primary school teacher, and the fact that I know that for however good a teacher she is, the school system and handling students, etc., those are the primary things a teacher has to do. They have to put up with a lot of every year changing the curriculum, so they always have to, every year coming up with new resources, etc. Loads and loads of stuff like that. And it's a lot of teaching despite, and student behaviour, etc. It's a lot of teaching despite factors, rather than really focusing on the fundamentals of teaching. And again, that's kind of sounds bad, but I'd also argue that fundamentals of teaching aren't well understood either. So the area I'm discussing is the field of pedagogy, the rather meta field of learning how people learn, or if you're explaining pedagogy to someone, the rather meta field of teaching someone how to teach. And it's the idea of getting ideas across quickly, succinctly, clearly. And the reason I say that, or I made the statement that I don't think schools are actually the gold standard of effectively pedagogy, and that kind of implies that I would have a suggestion as to what else might be, because otherwise that's a completely meaningless statement from my end. Say, oh yes, they're not because bad, but also not give alternative. The alternative, I would say, is actually kind of interesting, and it is YouTube videos. Physics-based YouTube videos, I would argue, are the gold standard, or maybe not physics, but for STEM teaching, I would say YouTube videos have become the gold standard. And the reason for this is because because of basically what it is that you need to do, how good you have to be in order to survive as a content creator of that form on YouTube. I guess I'm also partially jaded, because, for instance, I would highly, highly, highly recommend Professor Alan Adams' MIT lectures on quantum mechanics. Those are incredibly good lectures, and honestly, some of the intuition he provides at points within those, and some of the understanding he gets across, is very, very, very high standard, very, very high quality. I would highly recommend those lectures to anyone wanting to learn quantum mechanics. Perhaps not to anyone. There are prerequisite levels of maths, but if I'm honest, I knew about partial differential equations and could work with partial differential equations to some extent whilst watching the course. I had solved a couple in my time, but I'd never spent really much time on them. Being hit by a lot of stuff. So I hardly had the experience with them watching that course that I do now, and I still gained a lot from it. So huge props to that. huge props to that course, would recommend. So I guess there are examples of incredibly good teaching, but I would say they are easier to find on YouTube solely because school systems, inertia, volume, other things tend to prevail, not just understanding, like largely as well, how well they can teach people to perform in exams, because realistically that's what you'll be measured, that's what the universities or schools themselves will be measured on. If they could... Okay, teachers individually, morally, might disagree with this, but as a school, if they could come up with a way of getting you to perform incredibly well in exams without having any understanding or knowledge of the topic, they would do that without a second's hesitation. Again, the individuals within the systems may have concerns and qualms, and I would hope that, like, the individuals deciding what counts for a grade, etc., would never, like, come to those decisions. Like, it sounds again like I'm insulting people, and realistically, I hope everyone is moral enough that that the exam system would never end up like this. Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, like, I may not have a hugely high opinion of the current exam system, but, like, credit where it's due, I don't think it's possible to completely hack the system like that. Also, you may notice I'm taking more damage. I don't think that's because enemies have gone any denser. I think it's just because it's getting later and I'm becoming less bothered. But yeah, and I just found it incredibly interesting. And also, yeah, what can be learnt from them? And I then watched a quite interesting video by 3 Blue 1 Brown. I'm referencing 3 Blue 1 Brown a fair bit here. If you don't know who this is, I would highly, highly, highly recommend checking the channel out. I had friends recommend this channel to me for quite a while, and I didn't watch it. I think largely because what I'd seen was his course on linear algebra, and I was like, well, I already actually am. I'm pretty happy with my understanding of linear algebra. I don't, like, I might look at it if I needed someone to explain that to me, but I don't think I do. And in some sense, me watching it is an admission that I don't understand. It's like, no, I completely missed the point of the channel. Like, entirely. Yes, it's meant to be good at teaching, but yeah, that's about where my correct opinions ended. Actually, 3 Blue 1 Brown mentioned in this video I watched that one of the things he actually looked for, certainly initially, when picking topics, was topics that weren't widely covered, that weren't widely discussed. And the idea being not to necessarily do stuff like the linear algebra course, where it's providing good explanations for something that's quite a common problem. It was instead actually providing really, really high quality explanations for stuff that you wouldn't have even considered. Like, for instance, a link between the field of topology and geometric algebra. The specific video I'm thinking of being his video on the inscribed square problem, where he basically shows that, or the inscribed rectangle problem, which basically shows that quite an interesting problem is equivalent to the question of this really complicated problem of basically, given any shape, can you pick 4 points on that shape and draw lines between them such that you get a rectangle? And the way he chooses to go about proving this is by, using topology, and he shows that it is equivalent to the statement, shows that you being able to draw a rectangle is equivalent to the statement that you cannot topologically get from a disk to a Mobius strip, I believe, or I guess technically an annulus to a Mobius strip. You can't get without making a cut in your strip. And it's showing that rather cool link, which is something I never would have even thought to look at before. And that's genuinely what I think is quite cool for. It's the interesting links that. Yeah, but the reason why I would say I really hold that as like an incredibly high standard of pedagogy is for the fact that he describes this in about half an hour. If you were to go to a lecture course on this, you'd get something completely different. You'd get multiple lectures on the... You wouldn't ever have a lecture course on just this problem. The closest you'd get would be if you were to take simultaneous courses on probably topology and algebraic geometry. And you'd be, okay, probably just algebraic geometry, but you'd be lucky if you did this, because realistically the way things tend to be taught is by piling up abstractions, because it's the natural trap to fall into. If you already understand an abstraction, it's to introduce it, to kind of explain how it works, but to then do what to you is the far more exciting thing, which is explain what this abstraction gives you. Whereas what most teaching of this form misses out is showing why the abstraction itself exists, why it's interesting, and actually giving people that intuition for it. And I find that because YouTube videos have to be engaging, they can't get away with not explaining why an abstraction exists. They have to explain it, and they have to do a good job of it as well. In order for the video to be satisfying, you need to come away feeling like, oh hey, I actually understood that thing. And if someone can't achieve that, then they're not going to rise to the top of the YouTube algorithm, and they're not going to... Yeah, then they're not going to make money off of it. It's not going to be a sustainable source of income. They won't make as many videos in the long run. Whereas, conversely, lots of universities, their lecturers are incredibly, like, passionate, talented, interested people, incredibly knowledgeable as well, and often that's kind of the issue. That if you're knowledgeable, there might almost be too much you want to get across, or you might want to get to the cool stuff faster. But the issue also is that, at least at my university, a lot of the lecturers are people who are, like, actively researching their topics. Which means, whilst they would love to, I'm sure, and they will take the time, like, office hours for these lecturers are completely different to the lectures themselves, and are genuinely incredible. I would recommend anyone, really take advantage of office hours at your university, because especially if the lectures aren't great, because a lot of the time that's solely due to the fact that it takes a lot of time and effort to put together a good lecture course, because you have to cater for many people simultaneously when you're doing that. Whereas if someone's asking you a question, you can do a brilliant analogy that answers everything they're interested in pretty darn quickly. And yeah, I know our lecturers are genuinely amazing on that front, so this is in no sense arguing about teaching ability, but it's, the point that most lecturers do not have time to rewrite an entire course from scratch. And therefore most of them will just use the previous years, because you know what they're paid on, and what will help advance their career isn't lecturing, it's publishing papers. And so, like, the university / academic / research system as a whole is telling them, don't focus on this. For all that they want to, they're being told not to. So yeah, I do find pedagogy incredibly interesting, and one brilliant piece of advice was from Through Blue and Brown was, when you're doing a video that includes an abstraction, and this can be down to the you need to know your video's audience, but it can be down to the tiniest of things. If you're making something for young kids, and say you're introducing fractions, Describe why fractions are interesting. Don't just give them, like, kids quickly will work out, okay, yeah, you're giving me cake, this is a third of a piece of cake, and fractions tend to be introduced in one way, but that's just like a way of expressing how much of something, or maybe of sharing it out. But that doesn't, if those were like the sole reasons we were interested in fractions, then would we have that same concept of a fraction? Would we, importantly, have linked fractions with the concept of division? I'm not convinced we would. And so what actually makes fractions interesting is because they are an incredibly, they like cover ideas which come up incredibly often. And don't just give one example of that, give multiple examples and say, look, this thing occurs everywhere, let's try and understand this thing in abstract better, because maybe that will help us answer some questions we've been having. And once you start doing that, suddenly you've given people multiple contexts for this. And so people will, people will be far more likely to understand, or be far more interested in understanding this thing, because they understand not only like where the definition, not only what they're talking about, like they not only have some intuition built up for it from their physical day-to-day lives, but they also understand why you defined it in this way, why this isn't you just making up something completely random and talking utter nonsense. Like, why couldn't it have been defined in another way, for instance, was a really, really good question, I think. Why was it this definition that was used? Why is it this definition that's important and not another definition? I think those are incredibly interesting pieces of advice. I have now also been talking for about, I'd say, probably an hour and 15 minutes. So my throat is beginning to hurt, and unfortunately, I do not have any liquids nearby me, which is a bit of a problem. Certainly not near enough to grab, so my throat is hurting and I can't drink. And so I need to keep running around in circles. Honestly, I think I might call this at the 1 hour 30 mark and see what my score is, because I could keep doing this indefinitely, but I want to sleep. I don't know if anyone has gone for a record in terms of score yet. So, I don't know. And I also don't know how long they would have taken. I'd be interested. I suspect some people have. So currently my real limiting factor was I made it about an hour, and I think I'd used about 5 armor polishes. You could get... Actually, you probably wouldn't want to get those. They are probably comparatively quite expensive compared to... you'd probably want to get some, like, super armor shines or something, because this is more expensive, like, for the amount of armor it gives you. But yeah, you could stock up on a ton of those, and you could go indefinitely with this. Well, not indefinitely, but you could go for... If 5 of those lasted me an hour, like, consider how many inventory slots you have. They stack in 10. 24 hours is... What, 5 of those lasted me an hour, that's 12 inventory slots for 24 hours. That is... this. These first 3 rows of my inventory. That could last me an entire day if I were able to keep it up, which obviously I wouldn't be. So, point is it's very much limited by the amount of time you can spend this method, which means this method isn't great. Like, there's room for improvement, because, like, yeah, if I were able to, like, you could get, because you can't just do this indefinitely, it becomes not only a question of how long you can last, which is what I've been optimizing for, but how fast you can deal damage whilst you are alive, which is a completely different question. If you're trying to optimize for the total numerical score, and that will give you something else. But anyway, I think, okay, no, yeah, I'm gonna call it here. Thank you all. I was wondering whether or not I could get to an interesting time. I was wondering if I'd get a 13579, which would be 13619. But I don't think anyone else would be as interested in that number as I would be. So, with that said, I'm going to more or less do a Hail Mary. And stand and fight. And die very, very quickly. There we are. Is it not? Where's my high score? I want to know what I scored on this. Does it show it if I hit next? Yeah, there we are. 200,000. That ain't bad. I think I'll take that. I'm also going to quickly get a screenshot of this, just so I can flex.